Hiya fam. Today I'm talking about the very interesting um, reality of wizards. A wizard. No, I'm kidding. That wizards were, it seems traditionally older men. They've pretty much always been men. There was no Hermiones. Anyway, this idea of having these elders of wisdom, throughout history, like we had the three kings that are also known as the three wise men. They're from foreign lands. They studied like astrology and whatnot, and they probably studied like alchemy. They're very knowledgeable in the science of the time, which some of it was kind of mixed with spirituality, and it was all meshed together at the time. But they were very knowledgeable about these things, even though they erred in some ways, trying to learn about God's creation, the natural world, led them to Jesus. And we call them not only three kings, but three wise men to this day, because we have that understanding that they pursued wisdom, the knowledge and wisdom, and they found in baby Jesus. And that continuing like the Christianization of these figures, who some are more pagan and more like they're more into nature and natural world. They did have some sort of spirituality, some sort of religion, but tradition. I found recently that Merlin, very famous iconic wizard, King Arthur, he was actually originally from some sort of like pagan myth. I forgot, was it like a Norse thing? It was something more like pagan, and it kind of became Christianized. He was the child of like a demon or something. It's a very bizarre origin story, but it became Christianized, and like you just automatically assume like, okay, this is this older, wiser man, and he knows how to perform magic. And then you have iconic characters like Gandalf, and like these elder men of wisdom. And I think this first came to my mind like that we need that, and we're almost lacking in that because of the House of David that came out, I believe, last year, and seeing Samuel, the prophet, getting in a little bit of a tussle with with Saul, King Saul, and King Saul stating that, accusing him of being a sorcerer or something, and the prophet Samuel saying, "I am not a sorcerer." It's like, he's not a sorcerer, he's not a wizard, but he is a prophet. He's a man that's wiser and older, and although not all prophets, but most of the prophets in the Bible were like older men, like we see in Samuel, and like seeing that relationship between Samuel and King David, or who would eventually become king, and then kind of like that idea of having like this mentor, but also having this wiser older guide. You think like Bilbo and Gandalf, or even more so Frodo and Gandalf, and something a little bit more modern times, not as modern, but a lot more modern times of Ben Kenobi and Luke Skywalker. Like there's that tradition of that mentorship, that wisdom, this understanding of these wiser older men that take on the role of wizards. That all for a long time the wizards were portrayed as older men, and it's only like in recent days where it's like I think there was like a Merlin series where he was younger, but it's like they're iconic and they're known to be like older, wiser men, and to see like the changes that happen with kind of the loss of the older, wiser men and their presence in the world for one reason or another. I think part of it's like they are definitely not tech savvy people. That the literal boomer generation isn't like as tech savvy. They are passing away. My grandpa passed away last December, and so like all that going along made me think like, where are these wizards, where are these sages, where are these mentors, these wiser older mentors that we see in our media tradition, but also long for in our day-to-day lives, and realizing like there is a need for guidance and that wisdom, but it's lacking for one reason or another. And the way I see it is that the lack of being involved in social media in some ways is like a good thing, but also like it's the time that's needed now. Like, and someone like my grandpa being from like a very unique generation, and on top of that, there's definitely a lot of rise of like younger mentors that I've noticed, but then they don't have that wisdom. Like the value is in like, you know, men in their physical prime, but not like their spiritual prime, their mental, their spiritual prime, having this wisdom, which earned so many people's respect. Even the young people in their physical prime, and there's that desire there that's evident in our stories, like House of David and Lord of the Rings, King Arthur, for these wise mentor types. And thinking how we've entered this kind of this era of the young Kenobis, and we have these mentors, but they're kind of on the young side, versus having these elder who have cultivated this wisdom. And two things that stand out to me is like that kind of absence of that presence for whatever reason. And then on the other side of the reality, like with Star Wars, wow, we have these mentors, these young mentors, and we see how that turns out with the young Kenobi, and it was almost thrust upon him. It wasn't something that he chose. He wasn't like all gung-ho and it's like, oh, I can mentor this young Jedi Anakin, no problem, by myself. He lost his mentor, Qui-Gon Jinn, and it's like, I know it's a lot of nerdy Star Wars names, but so okay, there's this mentor. He was older, like full-grown adult, maybe in his 40s, if not older, a little bit older, and he was in charge of Ben Kenobi, and he also took on Anakin, this little boy. Unfortunately, spoiler alert if that matters, he was killed. And so this young, still a little bit naive, still maturing man had this responsibility thrust upon him to train this young boy, but this boy who is made very clear was promised to be very special, like the most special of the Jedis, these future wizards to be. And not to get too much into the Star Wars lore, because there's like this reality in the Star Wars universe where ideally at a young age they start this training, because at a young age they're more innocent, they're more trusting, and they're more fearless, so they're able to learn at a younger age to have mastery over their emotions. But this reality I noticed reflecting on this idea of wizards, because more than myself or people other than myself agree, like the Star Wars universe, Jedis are very much like space wizards, and the original Star Wars series, movie trilogy, whatever you want to call it, is based in like this kind of Christian medieval storytelling. And a lot of people agree, at the very least, like it definitely has these medieval themes set into sci-fi with knights, like literally they're called those Jedi Knights, and there's actually a princess that needs to be rescued and all that, and that it follows those traditional storytelling elements set into like more modern sci-fi, futuristic sci-fi setting. And there's multiple reasons to discuss why it has such a mass appeal, but the one I want to focus on is the reality of Ben Kenobi. He is mysterious, and so he's made very cool very early on, because he's mysterious. He saves their lives when they were being attacked by this vicious again, I guess group of nomads, you could call them, in the middle of the desert, and he manages to kick their butts and save Luke and his comrades. I think they were just robots at the time, but he saves them. And so there's a little bit of physical strength demonstrated there. For the most part, like the focus of these wizards is their wisdom, their spiritual prowess, like that, their intelligence and their wisdom in that realm. And it's just more than just the physical, it's the spiritual that he tries to train Luke Skywalker in. Obi-Wan Kenobi isn't just physically training him, it's more like mental and spiritual aspect as well, and the importance of growing wisdom. And I think it's natural for a lot of people to tend towards that idea, like, okay, older and wiser you're not at your physical peak, but at least you can be wise. And Jesus gives a parable, not necessarily a very virtuous person, but he says like there's a shrewd, cunning person, maybe in a sense wise steward who was going to get fired from his job. He heard that he was going to get fired from his job, so he made a plan because he quote unquote was too old to dig and too proud to beg. So he's like, I got to make a plan so that once I do get fired, once I do get let go, I'll be taken care of. So he uses his like intelligence, his wisdom, his cunningness, however you want to phrase it, to provide for himself. But on the more virtuous side, Ben Kenobi having mastery over his emotions, trying to help Luke develop mastery over his emotions, and carrying himself in a way where you automatically earned his respect, his trust, and you believe that he is this wise sage of a man, this guru, and there's something spiritual about it. And the reason I'm bringing it up because there's definitely a contrast in the movies, whether you're a fan of all however many there are nowadays, those original 3, those original 6, there is some contrast versus the first 3 versus the next 3, 4, 5, and 6 movies. But one that stood out to me was the young Ben Kenobi versus the old Ben Kenobi, and also just the idea of like classic, more traditional movie, like the original Star Wars movie, which I think now refer to as The New Hope, having this guy who's mysterious, he's wise, he's also kind of charming, and I think some of it's direction, some of it's definitely like the actor choice, but like he's not physically at his prime. He's a lot of kind of grandpa vibes, a lot of charm to him, but also like this aura, you could even say, wisdom and years of experience and mysteriousness because of all that knowledge and wisdom that he's cultivated over the years. But even when it comes to training Luke, like a lot of the training for becoming a Jedi and knowing and understanding how to use the Force, that is a powerful little like force and tool in the movie, is that reality of like the spiritual side of things and honing into your emotions, understanding your emotions, and not caving into anger, and the emotional and the psychological and the mental and the spiritual, not just the physical training. That was pivotal to it. So it's not like just that this man is obviously wise because he's older and he has years of experience, but also that to be developed as a man, the main character has to grow in terms of emotional stability and maturity and spiritual stability and maturity, not simply physical. But I just find it interesting, like, okay, the young men, they're the physical prime of their lives, and they use that to be knights and they fight, but then in their old age, preparing for that, like it's tough enough nowadays, in modern times and day and age, for young men and to put up the good fight when there's so much going against them. They try to battle spiritually because they are at their strongest now, that young adulthood age, to physically and mentally, but that sort of starts to decline in their older years. But they can hand down their wisdom, even though they aren't as physically strong as they used to be. Someone try to stay physically strong as they can, but a reality that instead they cultivate this respect, even though there's so much focus on looks and physical strength and all that. There's these men who may not look as good or as handsome as all these streamers, or be as physically strong or whatever, not be their physical prime, but my point being that they are still respected, they're still loved, they're still admired. Why? By both men and women. Like, why? Because they've cultivated wisdom, because they've grown in virtue, cultivated virtue, demonstrated great amounts of courage, bravery in their younger years, and they will sacrifice themselves, that even their older years when they're weak and they are becoming more helpless, like my grandpa was, you can't help respect the guy. No matter how weak he becomes, he's always going to be strong in your eyes and in your heart because of the sacrifice he made. And I guess I feel like I can't wrap this up without talking about my grandpa and him being part of the greatest generation as my dad mentioned in his eulogy for my grandpa this past December, well, actually this past January, that his parents, they were willing to give up their sons, so that's a demonstration of character, because they're willing to sacrifice their sons and let their sons go to war, and they're willing to endure like the fear and pain and the loss of having their sons go to war and maybe even die in war, not knowing if their sons will live or die, and hearing some of them had, because I had a great uncle who did pass away. My grandpa endured the traumas of war, but having a brother of his die in the war, very traumatic, very tragic, very sad, and like he endured a great deal. And yeah, his generation and the generation before him, like they're different people than this generation. We have our own sort of battles to fight, but it's like these are people who are like legendary people. There's nobody quite like these generations. That is, don't compare. And obviously he's my grandpa, so like no one can compare to him. He's one of the best. I want to say he's the best because I'm his granddaughter, but like he was one of the best. But I think a lot of people would agree that generation was like one of the greatest generations. They've endured so much. My grandpa suffered from PTSD even before they fully understood that. Based on my dad's recounts, some of his memories as a child, like knowing that my grandpa would have these outbreaks of PTSD, and again, they didn't fully understand what that was. Something to do with the war, obviously, but they didn't fully understand what PTSD. I'm not even sure if they had the word for it at the time when he was having these like PTSD episodes, and like the trauma of that. Like you would probably know going into the war, like yeah, I'm gonna be traumatized, but not having like the psychological and medical advances that we have today, and enduring that. I mean, some certain degree choosing to endure that, but yeah, signing up, saying I want to sacrifice for my country, even if it means giving up my own life, losing my life, and knowing for a fact that my grandpa sacrificed his life. Well, he didn't sacrifice his life, but was willing to sacrifice his life and sacrifice so much physically, emotionally, to serve his country, and in a way, indirectly, and then later on in life, directly, so that we could enjoy the pleasures that we have today. It's mind-blowing every time to think about, and it's something that I really appreciate, and I feel like it was a blessing to have him as long as we did. He lived over 100, not much longer, but like he lived to be 100 and a little bit beyond, and recognizing that special character, that special person, personally as my grandpa, but just like as an iconic person of that whole entire age, that generation, prime example of that generation, and to see what we become, and we could be maybe not exactly that, but we desire that. And I feel like that example is missing, and to treasure what I have with my grandpa, and to take a moment to honor him, because he sacrificed so much so that we, like all of us, of course me and my family directly, could have the privileges we have today. So while it's tempting to focus on just all these physically iconic stars, it's just people of character, inside and out, that stand out, and no matter how weak or old they become and don't fit the standards, the superficial standards, the world of what should be attended to. There's definitely a lot of people like, yeah, we have mad respect for our veterans, and this man earned a Purple Heart, and he does deserve our respect, even though that he has passed away. And you have to be there at his funeral and to know that they did send people to honor him, and they give him special like a ritual of honor, the American flag and everything, and the salute. That glamour, it's glamorous, it shines, it catches your eye, in the mainstream media, but this man is like a flickering candle in our lives, the lives of so many people, even after he has passed away. And it wasn't too long ago, but it was more than a few months now. It's like he's still in our hearts and our minds, and he still was like so respected while he was alive by so many people. And I don't doubt it now that he's admired, that he's remembered, that he's respected long after. And he has such a legacy. And like I mentioned, like he got these awards, he got these Purple Hearts, and he was proud to share that he served his country, that he sacrificed for his country. He didn't feel like the need to flex on him. It was just the fact that he was willing to share, like, yeah, he was willing to sacrifice so much, and he went through so much that we can't even imagine. And he left behind so much that is deserving his honor and respect. But I can't forget that he had 3 children, and I'm gonna say 7. How many grandchildren? Oh yeah, 9 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren. He wasn't fully aware at the time that he had 6 grandchildren. She's not born yet. She will be in the summer. But yeah, that's an incredible legacy there. Paved the way so that so our family could like grow, and he was alive for 6 great-grandchildren. He wasn't aware of the 6th grandchild because she still is in my womb, and he was in and out of consciousness. He would zone out, he'd have his eyes open, he'd be breathing and all, but his mind was checked out. He had a sharp memory, and even though his mind is just checked out, it wasn't quite dementia, but he was definitely deteriorating, and his mind was checked out, and we could see it coming. But emotionally it was kind of surprising. Shaking. It's definitely shaking, despite the fact that we could see it coming. It was probably time. The Lord was probably calling him home, and it was tough because he would have these hallucinations, and he'd always talk about how he wanted to go home. And I knew like that's probably because he's going to go home. Like he could snap out of it and stop having these delusions and live so many years. But I think he had lived such a full life, and it made sense to me if the Lord wanted to call him home soon. And as soon as he in fact did, that it was no surprise. That it was understandable and fitting. If he wanted to live, I would hope that he would snap out of this delusional state and stop zoning out and everything. But it was pretty clear. Like it was time for him to go to his eternal home, where he is now. So I appreciate you all for taking the time to listen. I hope we seek deeper things, and we learn from someone like my grandpa. And I know it's hard to find wizards in this modern day age. I feel like they fall short when compared to my grandpa. I like hope there's like some wise priest out there. That to me, they're the most sagely, wizardly of our modern day real world age that I can think of. Like who's a better, truer master sage than a priest who can summon, who has the authority to summon God in mass. It's just an incredible, amazing thing. And to have the wisdom of the church and be raised and cultivating that wisdom, and to seek to seek the truth, to seek wisdom, and not just the superficial. Because even in our worldly world, we have a desire for the wise and the learned, even if they aren't looks to the max, or however you want to phrase it. They still earn our honor and respect, even to this day, even once they're old and weak, even once they're gone. So I think it's easy to forget that. It's tempting to forget that with this modern age of seeking glamour and attention. But I would hope that the more wizards would rise up, that we would have more wise men coming and speaking out publicly and capture people's attention. People actually turn to listen to them. And with that said, thank you. And God love you. Bye.
I was lost, but now I have found what there